right, so we are in 2 Timothy chapter 2. I want you to notice what it says in verse 3. It says, "Thou therefore endure hardness as a good soldier of Jesus Christ. No man that warreth entangleth himself with the affairs of this life, that he may please him who hath chosen him to be a soldier." And I want you to notice how Paul said to endure hardness. And the simple fact is, being a soldier, it's difficult. It's a very difficult thing. The Bible often refers to the Christian life as a fight. Paul said he fought a good fight. We just sang a lot of songs about fighting and about warfare, because Christians in the past have understood that the Christian life, it's a fight, it's a battle, it's warfare. And not even, and again, getting saved is a completely different thing. Getting saved, it's a free gift that you receive from Christ. But if you want to be a servant of His, He has called you to be a soldier. He has called you to fight. He's called you to endure hardness. He never said serving Him was going to be an easy thing. It's going to be difficult. He warned His disciples and told them, you're going to go through tribulations, you're going to endure trials, you're going to be betrayed. He was constantly warning them about all these things that they were going to be facing. And in this life, if you are a soldier or a fighter, one of the things that you're going to do, you are going to take the time to exercise or even simulate a fight in some way. You know, if you decide to become a boxer, okay, I'm not a boxer, but I doubt the first thing they do is just throw a pair of boxing gloves on you and throw you in a ring with somebody. No, the first thing you're going to do, you're going to go, you're going to put on some punching bags, or boxing gloves, and you're going to go hit a punching bag for a while. You know, you're going to go and you're going to train, you're going to exercise, you're going to condition yourself. And there are people, they are really good at, the speed bag and punching a bag really hard. I mean, they might have a super punch. But let me tell you, it's a completely different thing when you get in a ring and somebody's swinging back at you. You can be really good at doing all those maneuvers. You can even be really in shape, but it's a completely different thing when somebody's swinging back at you, and then especially after they hit you. It hurts. There's a lot of people, they're really good at shooting a gun. They know how to hit that target. They know how to handle that gun real well. But let me tell you, it's a completely different thing when all of a sudden somebody's shooting at you. It's a very different thing. And in church, one of the things that we do is, we try to teach the Bible, and we teach you things that you can do to train yourself, prepare yourself. If you don't do any training, you're going to do really bad when you finally get in a ring in boxing. If you don't do any training as a soldier, when you go into that battle, you're not going to know what to do. You're not going to be able to hit your target. You're going to get creamed. But either way you look at it, at some point, you're going to have to get in the real battle, and it all changes when you get hurt. And you know what? You're going to get hurt. When you're boxing, getting punched hurts. If you're in a war, getting shot hurts. I'm assuming. Thankfully, I've never experienced that. I don't want to experience that. I've never even been shot at. Okay? I've been shot at with paintballs, and that's bad enough. I mean, have you been there before? You got pinned down by somebody shooting at you with paintballs, and then it hurts. Imagine in a real war where it's actual bullets. I can't even imagine what that would be like. And I heard a story of a preacher one time who took a bunch of college students out to a field and thought they needed to learn what it's like to be getting shot at because the Muslims were going to take over, and he was kind of crazy. And so he went and took them out in the field and started shooting a gun over them, made them lay down. Okay, I promise as a pastor I will never do that to the young men in this church, okay? I'm just going to commit to that right now. I'm not going to prepare people like that. But people do need to understand you are going to get hurt. And what I want to preach about today is how to fight, how to keep fighting while wounded. How to keep fighting while wounded, because it's going to happen. In church, I do a lot of preaching trying to prepare people for what's coming, and also to avoid things. One of the things they'll teach you in boxing is how to avoid a punch. Don't just stand there and take it. You need to learn how to block, you need to learn how to duck and maneuver, because the less you get hit, the better. But either way, at some point you got to learn how to get hit, because you're going to get hit. You can't avoid all pain. And if you don't train for these things, you're not going to be effective. And as Christians, we have got to learn how to take hits and to keep going, because you know what? I figured out after over 20 years of ministry, there's no way to keep from getting hit. There's no way to keep from getting shot. There's no way to keep from getting hurt. You are going to get wounded in a battle. He said, I've been in the ministry over 20 years. I grew up in a pastor's home. And you know, I'm pretty good at seeing what's coming. I'm pretty good at that. In fact, what inspired this message, when I was preparing for my sermon I preached last week at Love Assembly, I went back and I looked at the notes from what I preached here on our 5th anniversary, 8 years ago. And I'm looking at those notes, and one of the things I did in there, I said in there kind of some of the things we're probably going to start facing in the future. And it was almost prophecy. It wasn't prophecy, but it was almost prophecy. And I saw that, and you know, I was just like, man, I knew what I was talking about. But at the same time, all those things that I said were probably going to come, I got to thinking, I have done a lot of preaching over the years on how to avoid a lot of these problems and a lot of these challenges. And you know what? We didn't. All those things I said are probably going to happen, they all happened. And I just came to this realization that, often what we try doing is we try learning how to just avoid all conflict. We try to learn how to avoid all pain. And obviously we don't want to just run after conflict, and we don't want to get hurt on purpose. But I realize that part of what we have to do as Christians and what we have been called to do as Christians is to keep fighting while hurting, to keep fighting while wounded. We are going to get nailed, and it's about not avoiding it, it's about enduring it. Paul said, he didn't say avoid hardness like a smart soldier. He said endure hardness as a good soldier. It's going to be difficult. You're going to get hurt. It's going to be painful. You're going to want to lay down and quit. You're going to want to give up. But part of being a soldier is to endure it and to keep going. And we've got a generation today. We have a generation of people who don't know how to handle any kind of pain or conflict. You know, the previous generations, they learned what causes difficulties. They learn how to avoid a lot of difficulties. And what they've tried to do with the next generation is try to help them avoid all of those conflicts. Well, let me ask you, what has it produced? Weakness. We have helped our young people avoid all challenges, all conflict, avoid all heartache. They don't have to experience seeing red ink on all their mistakes on their tests. They haven't had to deal with the agony and the pain of watching the other team get the trophy and you being the loser. You know, we helped them avoid all that pain, but what did we produce? We produced a bunch of blue hairs out protesting on campuses and rioting when things don't go their way, things that they don't even understand. That's what we accomplished. That's what we produced from that kind of thing. You know what we should have done? We should teach them how to be good losers, how to congratulate the other team, how to hold their head high and to go shake hands with the other team and congratulate them on their victory. And then we should have let them experience a coach chewing them out and telling them how pathetic and sorry they were for failing. You know, they should have heard their boy. That coach should have told those boys, you played like a bunch of girls. That's what they should have heard. But no, we can't do that. We can't make them feel bad. And so we do. We have a generation of pansies. We have a generation, Zoomers. They're just some of the most worthless people on the planet. You don't want them working for you. You don't want them doing anything. They expect the world for nothing. That's what we have produced as a result of this. And let me tell you something. God never called for this kind of thing. God never told us how to avoid all conflict. What God taught us is we need to just endure conflict. We need to endure pain. And so it's like, you know what? I'm done trying to avoid things. I think what we need to do is just teach people how to take the hits, how to take the beatings, how to run through the gauntlet and just go through all the pain that goes through everything, because you can't avoid it. You can't avoid it no matter how much you know what's coming, no matter how much you prepare up here, no matter how much you prepare all the way, you're going to get hit at some point. We can't possibly predict what the enemy is going to do every time. We're going to make a mistake. We're going to slip up. We're going to get hit, but we can't give up. We have to keep going. And I hope everyone listens to the preaching that I've done over the years, because there are some things we can avoid and we should avoid. You know, if you can duck something, duck it. If you can avoid it, avoid it. But, we need to learn how to duck and dodge and punch and all those things. But no matter what, we're going to get hit. And when you get hit, you don't get to lay down and give up. That's not what God called. Oh, man, you know what? You did get hit pretty hard. I understand. No, He wants you to get up. He wants you to endure it. We see in the Bible, all the greatest Christians had to fight wounded quite often. In 2 Corinthians chapter 12 and verse 7, the Apostle Paul speaking said, "And lest I should be exalted above measure through the abundance of the revelations, there was given to me a thorn in the flesh, the messenger of Satan to buffet me, lest I should be exalted above measure." If we get so good at our Christian life that we're able to just go through everything and we win every battle. We're the one, we never have a punch landed on us. We never get hurt. You know what's probably going to happen? We're going to get cocky. We're going to get lifted up with pride. And the Apostle Paul had a lot of things going for him. But he said, lest I should be exalted above measure. There was a thorn in the flesh that was given to me. And we don't know exactly what that was. Nobody knows exactly what that thorn in the flesh was, that messenger of Satan that was buffeting Paul. But it was something so bad, 3 different times Paul went to the Lord asking Him to remove that thorn. But God said, He said unto me, "My grace is sufficient for thee." God didn't say, I'm going to take that thorn away. I'm sorry that you're going through pain. I don't know what that's like. I only endured the cross. I was only dead for 3 days, suffering the pains of death. I don't know what that's like. Well, no, God knew exactly what it was like. And you know what God told Paul? My grace is sufficient. He's saying, you can still do this. You can still do what I need you to do, even though you're suffering some pain right now. And when Paul realized that, he said, most gladly, therefore, I will rather glory in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Therefore, I take pleasure in infirmities, in reproaches, in necessities, in persecution, in distress for Christ's sake. For when I am weak, then am I strong. Paul understood I actually do better when I'm weak because I rely more on God. So he said, I take pleasure in infirmities. And don't we take pleasure in seeing other people fight battles wounded? How exciting would Rocky be if it was just him pounding on guys all the time? No, it's him getting pounded on. And over and over and over again, but he keeps getting up. That's why it's exciting. I'm thinking about Rocky. I was just in Philly, the land of Rocky. On battles and movies, there's just something about seeing that guy bloody and wounded. Maybe he's got the arrow stick on, but he's out there, he's still fighting. He's still giving it all he's got. Boy, we enjoy watching the other person do that, but isn't that the glorious victory? Isn't that the glorious fight? That guy that's wounded and he just keeps on going? That's supposed to be us. That's where we accomplish the most for God, when we find ourselves in a weakened state. Why are we weakened? Because we're hurt. We're weakened because we're in pain. We're suffering. We're going through all these things that we don't enjoy going through. We did all that training so we could feel like we're on the top of our game and do the most damage to the enemy. But the simple fact is, that enemy, they did some training, they did some preparing, and you're going to get hurt. But as Christians, we can keep going. We still need to keep going. God's grace is sufficient. When we're weak, then He is strong. But when we're strong, He's going to be weak. It's going to be more us than it is Him, and we need to be more Him than it is us. And if we will do that, if we will be dependent on Him, we can do great things. Too many Christians are trying to figure out, how can I go fight in a battle where I never get hurt? That's what they're trying to do. I want to go to a church where I can go get in the battle, but nothing will ever hurt me. No one will ever upset me. The pastor won't ever preach anything that makes me feel bad. Listen, that's not what God called us to do. You're not going to find that kind of thing. None of us like pain, but understand we have been called to suffering. We need to have faith. God will keep His promises and He will reward us for the pain. Galatians 6:9 says, "And let us not be weary in well-doing, for in due season we shall reap, if we faint not." Now, why would we faint? You know why we faint? Because we're weary. Because we're hurting. We're tired. That's why we faint. But notice he says, you'll reap if we faint not, which makes it sound like we kind of have a choice in it. The reality is, when it comes to the spiritual battle, obviously there are some things we all are limited physically. Even Jesus, when he was on earth, would get weary and just needed food and sleep and time to get alone. We see that. We are all limited physically. But spiritually, the limit there really is dependent on our faith. I mean, if we have faith, we can move mountains, the Bible says. It really comes down to our faith. And the truth is, if we faint spiritually, it's a lack of faith that causes us to do that. And we make that choice. We end up losing faith. We end up or not having faith in the way we should. And we do. We faint. We give up. We fall out. We quit. We give up. That's not what we're supposed to do. And it's when we're wounded, we rely more on God and do the greatest works. Philippians 3:9 says, and be found in him, not found in having mine own righteousness, which is of the law, but that which is through the faith of Christ, the righteousness which is of God by faith, that I may know him and the power of his resurrection and the fellowship of his sufferings, being made conformable unto his death, if by any means I might attain unto the resurrection of the dead. We all say we want to know God, but you know, one of the ways you can get to know somebody is having something in common with them. And if you want to get to know Christ better, you are not going to get to know him better by having a life of ease. You know why? Because Jesus didn't have a life of ease. You know what Jesus dealt with? Suffering. And so when we suffer, that helps us for good things. Not suffering as an evildoer. We're not going to talk about that. Many people suffer as an evildoer or a busybody in other men's matters. No, if we're suffering for the cause of Christ, then that's a fellowship that we have with him. That's something that we have in common. Sometimes, people, cancer survivors will find each other. Why? They have that in common. They've both been through that battle. Maybe they've both been through the chemo treatments. Whatever problem you have, we often find that common ground with somebody, and often we form friendships as a result of it. We were talking about it in church yesterday, when we were out soul winning yesterday, when it comes to friendships within the church, the reality is what most of us all have in common here is Jesus Christ, its doctrine, and service to God. That's why we come together. We're all from different families, different places, different backgrounds. We all have different hobbies, likes, dislikes, but yet we are able to have a close fellowship and a friendship with each other because we have those things in common. Now, but the reality is, if we were to separate, and we're not going to church with each other anymore, we're probably not going to have that fellowship because this church is something very important that we have in common that draws us together. And if we don't have that, then it's like, I don't even understand why I should like you. Okay? And I'm not trying to be mean, but it's like we don't really have anything in common. It's not that they're not likable or anything, but it's just like this is what we have in common. And it's like when you get with the Cardinals fans, it's like, who are you people? Why would I have anything to do with you? Now, and that obviously that's a very carnal illustration, but it is. This is mainly what we have in common. And some of us, we have a lot other things in common, and you probably would be good friends, even if you didn't have this church in common. But most of us that are here today, we are probably good friends because of what we have in common with Jesus Christ, but then the service that we do in this church. Just like construction workers, or mechanics or whatever, they all have that common bond with each other because they're doing the same work. That draws them together. Well, one thing that will draw you closer to Christ is if you live a life like he lived, and he lived a life that had suffering. He lived through a life that where he went through pain. And when you go through pain, you know what? It's going to cause you to look to Christ more. You're going to understand what he went through more. You're going to appreciate what he did more. When he sees you suffering for his cause, you know what he's going to do? He's going to give you more grace. He's going to get closer to you. He's going to make himself known to you even more, and you're going to become a better, more effective Christian because of suffering. But yet, so many Christians, they say, I want to know him, but I don't want to know any suffering. Well, you're not going to get to know him very well if you don't have suffering. I'd like to know more about God. I'd like to know a lot more about the Bible, but I don't want
I don't want to take any stands when it comes to the unpopular stuff. I don't want, I want to preach and I want God to use me. But I'm not going to preach a whole counsel of God. I mean, good night. This is 2024. Hey, sorry. That's not how that works. Jesus, He didn't trim the message to get along with other people. In fact, if you preach a message that gets you in trouble with people, that, you know what? That's more you have in common with Jesus Christ. Because He knows what it's like to preach a message and to clear the audience. He knows what it's like to preach a message and to have people plotting and going after Him. Jesus never had the Billy Graham experience. That's not what Jesus went through. That's not how things ended for Jesus Christ. But we got a lot of people, they say they want to know Christ, but yet they want what Billy Graham got. Sorry, that's not how these things work. That absolutely is not how these things work. And we need to learn to take pleasure in infirmities. And so if we're going to have close fellowship, we have to be where He is. We have to be in the fight. And so we get close to someone when we have things in common, a life of bliss, a life of ease. Like, who in the Bible that was good had a life of bliss and ease? Moses? No. All right, Paul? No. David? No. I mean, folks, anybody that we know that we use as an example of good, they all suffered. How about Job? No. No, none of these people. How about all those people in Hebrews 11? We all want to have faith, right? I want to have great faith. Well, go read Hebrews 11 and see what those people went through. You know what they went through? All the things we want to avoid. You know what? They were people who fought and were wounded, who suffered. In Hebrews 12, in verse 3, notice what it says, "For consider Him that talking about Jesus, endured such contradiction of sinners against Himself, lest ye be wearied and faint in your minds." That's just like what Paul was talking about in Galatians 6. Because when it comes to the wounds that we receive and the battles we fight, they aren't physical, but they're spiritual and emotional. And folks, spiritual and emotional wounds are real wounds. Okay, all right, can we just acknowledge that? You better believe they're real. Sometimes I would rather take the physical wound over the spiritual wound. They cut deep. They hurt. Worse than getting punched in the nose. A punch in the nose, it'll heal up pretty quick. It's painful when it happens, but it'll go away. You'll heal and be like nothing ever happened. But some of those spiritual wounds, they can really cut deep. And so he said we need to consider Him. We need to remember what Christ did, lest we be wearied and faint in our minds. Look at this. Ye have not resisted unto blood, striving against sin. And ye have forgotten the exhortation which speaketh unto you as unto children. My son, despise not thou the chastening of the Lord, nor faint when thou art rebuked of Him. For whom the Lord loveth, He chasteneth, and scourgeth every son whom He receiveth. So notice this, you've not resisted unto blood. Hey, while they had fought battles, while they had resisted, they hadn't bled yet. Now, listen, in the Bible, sometimes they literally bled in the battle. Paul, many times, literally bled. Most of the time, especially in America, the battles that we fight, while they are real, while the pain is real, while the wounds are real, they're all spiritual. They're all in our mind, still real. But we're not bleeding. Okay? We're not getting whipped. We're not getting thrown in jail. Okay? And so, notice how he said too, and then he mentions the chastening of God. Hey, don't faint when you're chastened of God. Don't despise it. Don't faint when you're rebuked of Him. Don't act like a millennial. Don't act like a Zoomer when somebody tells you something negative, when your boss has to get on you, you quit your job for emotional distress. Don't do that. Endure it. Because one of the things I've seen people do too, like what coaches will do when they're preparing people for bike, I've seen them where the guys stand there and they just let the guys punch them in the stomach. It's like, man, they're just going to let them punch them in the stomach? You know what? Why do they do that? They need to learn how to take a hit. They need to learn how to they're trying to toughen up those muscles. They're trying to prepare them because that's what's going to happen. If you're going to box, you are going to get hit. And if you're going to be a good boxer, it's not about just learning how to never get hit. It's about taking a hit and to continue fighting. And so God, He's trying to help us. He's trying to train us. And so when we mess up, often He rebukes us. Often He might even bring us pain. He's going to chasten us. It's not fun. It's painful. It doesn't bring us any pleasure, but it produces something. It'll cause a toughness in us. It will give us an endurance that we need. And so He's going to do that with every son whom He receiveth. And this is why we need church and fellowship with believers so we can renew our minds in this area. Sometimes, we are the ones, you're going to be the one taking the hit. And when you're the one taking the hit, it helps to have other people around you cheering you on. Hey, you can do this. Hey, you can handle this. It helps if we've had somebody who's been there before and fought that battle. And I tell you, one of the things that I've learned over the years too, just pastoring, parenting, whatever, any area of life where I've ever fought any kind of battle is, there's always somebody out there who can take away that, who just ruins your pity party because they've been through it and been through it worse. Like, you tell somebody your problem, I've had people before, you call them to tell them about your problems, and then it's like, yeah, man, I know that, and then they've been through it way worse. It's like, all of a sudden, it's like, wow, I guess that's not that bad. It could be a whole lot worse. Just, some of the stories that I've heard, Brother Mathis, who preached here last week, he was telling me some stories about nightmare church members and things like that. And I'm like, man, my people are saints and wonderful and, piece of cake. That's bad stuff. And, we were talking about it, so maybe one of these days what I'd like to do is, I said, we need to do like a series, for a few weeks. I said, and I can do some of them, he could do some of them, where we wouldn't live stream it, but we just tell horror stories about terrible church members. And just to learn from these things. I wouldn't tell stories about people here. Again, I think I have stories sometimes, but then it's just like, man, no, I got a lot of good people, and I was talking to them about our church, and I'm just kind of telling them about everybody, and it was just like, man, yeah, we got a pretty good thing going here. We got a lot of good people. So there's been exceptions over the years, but either way, it could be so much worse. And you say, well, why would you even do something like that? Well, one, it's therapeutic. But two, again, so we can learn. So I don't like that. Well, the Bible gives a lot of bad examples of people too. We're supposed to learn from it. So we're not going to live stream it. We're not trying to humiliate people. Most of them will be from the last church, which is why I don't want to live stream it. I would feel bad if some of them watched it. I've forgiven them. I've moved on. But again, if we can learn from other people's mistakes, that's a blessing. That's a good thing. And so, but we need that fellowship. Look at what it says in Ephesians 6:16. I like this verse here. This is when it's talking about the whole armor of God. Notice what it says, above all. So it's telling you to put on the whole armor of God so we can stand against the wiles of the devil. And the sword of the Spirit, all these different things that it's telling you to take. But it says, above all, if you are going to be a soldier in this battle, above all, take the shield of faith, wherewith ye shall be able to quench all of the fiery darts of the wicked. So notice how it talks. It says, above all. This is important. If you don't have that shield of faith, you are not going to be able to quench those fiery darts. And the truth is, the way we fight wounded, I don't believe this is saying you'll never get hurt. It's talking about quenching those fiery darts, but the way we fight wounded is by having the faith we need to let God heal us. And I believe we can literally walk off deadly wounds. That's what we have to do. Folks, I can't find in the Scriptures how to avoid getting hurt. I can't find in the Scriptures how to avoid pain. I cannot figure out from the Scriptures what we can do as a church to just make sure from here on out, all mountaintops, no valleys. I can't figure that out. I'm starting to think it's not in the Scriptures. That's what I'm starting to think. Unless somebody else is finding it and I'm just missing it. Okay, so the reality is, since we've been called to do all these things, since we've been called to endure all these things, how does God expect us to fight wounded, do all these things? You know what? God can heal us if we have faith. God gave us all those stories in the Bible of Him physically healing people. Why? He was trying to teach us a spiritual truth. And the simple fact is, if we will have faith, we can walk off the deadly wounds. You can handle it. You can keep on fighting. We faint in our mind, but you got to have faith. There's going to be times you're going to have to go to the Lord and say, Lord, I have to be healed from this. And if it's true, you do have to be healed to keep on fighting, He can heal you. But you know what He might do too? He might just just fight through it. Endure it. Just depend a little more on me. Get a little closer to me. Fight next to me. You're going off and you're doing your own thing. You need to be fighting next to me. You need to be doing what I'm wanting to do. But folks, what are some of these fiery darts that often take out Christians? There's a lot of things. Sometimes betrayal. What's interesting about it, to me in the Bible about the relationship between Jesus and Judas. It's such a fascinating thing because Jesus knew from the beginning that Judas was going to betray Him. He knew he had a devil. I mean, Jesus knew exactly who He was, but yet it is very apparent from the Scriptures that Jesus loved Judas. When they're at that Last Supper, it doesn't say He skipped Judas when He's washing their feet. We don't see that kind of thing. And yet, and I don't believe Jesus was just blowing smoke. I don't think He was just saying words to say them. But when Judas came and betrayed Jesus, Jesus knew what was going on. But they were trying to, it's very clear from the Scriptures, they were trying to make it appear like, Judas was trying to cover himself while he was betraying Christ. The soldiers are watching, and Judas approaches Jesus and greets Him with a kiss. You can only do that with somebody who you're close to. You can only do that with somebody who trusts you and lets you in their space. There are some people, if they get too close to you, what are you going to do? You're going to back off. Because sorry, who are you? I don't know you well. But those people that you let get close to you, those are people you trust. I mean, Judas was the guy holding the bag. They trusted him with the money. And when Judas came and approaches Jesus and kisses Him, Jesus, knowing he's doing that to identify him, he's giving him away so the soldiers know who to get. What did Jesus say? Judas, betrayest thou me with a kiss? That's low. It's like, well, wow, Jesus was a stinking devil, dirty reprobate. I'm not surprised He did it. Well, you know what? It still hurt Jesus. It still hurt Him when that happened. Jesus never did anything bad to Judas. Jesus never hurt Judas. Jesus was good to Judas. But yet, look what Judas went and turned around and did. Folks, that's going to happen. You're going to get betrayed. You're going to get hurt. You're not going to deserve it. It's going to be painful. It's going to make you want to quit. You know how many people are giving up on Christianity because they got hurt in church? I mean, we've got recovering fundamentalists that are out there because they all got hurt. Some of them too. Some people were done wrong. I mean, some people have some pretty bad horror stories about things they've experienced. But you know what? I listen to these people tell their stories sometimes about what traumatized them and how they've been in therapy for years for these things and they've gone full-blown trendy. And it's like, I've actually, and I'll listen to these people. And sometimes if you're not careful, it's like, hey, I'm a victim too. But then I'm like, wait a minute, that was like 30 years ago. I forgot it even happened. You know what that means? I got healed. Now, it's like what they want you to do, they're trying to get you to pick those old wounds. That's what they're trying to do. But you know what? It's like God healed me of those things. And it's amazing. I'll listen to some of these people. They will talk about all their trauma from being an independent fundamental Baptist. But at the same time, too, I look back on my years as an independent fundamental Baptist, and I'm just so grateful. And I listen to experiences, and it's like, and it is. It's like, I have had those negative things, but I've had all these wonderful things, and I've realized God's healed me through those things. I mean, I still suffered. I got hurt, but God healed those things. And the problem with the route these people are taking, going the recovering way and all that, is they're never getting healed. They never find healing. They're always recovering. No, they need to just let God heal them. They need to keep being faithful. Yes, betrayal happens. Infiltrators come into churches. Bad preachers do things. Abuse happens. It's not right, but God can heal you. Sins committed against you. I mean, we can't. And again, sometimes the devil, he does. He gets in your head. Sometimes the devil, he'll remind me of things. And there are moments that will surface, and I will remember things that happened to me. And I'm not even going to tell those stories because I don't need to go picking those old wounds. But but if I wanted to, if I wanted to be a recovering fundamentalist, I could, because I got some great stories. I got some great stories. That podcast would be a big hit. But you know what? I don't want to live a life of perpetual victimhood. I want to continue enduring hardness as a good soldier. I've already healed. It's time to move on. I don't need to go back to those things, but you're going to have sins committed against you. Another thing too, you're going to have to watch people give up and quit, and it hurts seeing fellow comrades fall in the battle. And I was asked a question recently about the most impactful sermons that I ever heard. It was going to be, I was invited on a podcast. That was one of the questions. They never got to that one. But I remember I started thinking about it. I was like, what sermons have been the most impactful in my life? And the one that I thought of that I was going to talk about, I don't remember exactly what the title of it was. But this was one I remember my dad preached years ago. And the reason I say this has probably been the most impactful sermon, because it's one that my mind has gone back to so many times. Since I've been pastoring, I have many times I've thought about this sermon, I've thought about some of the points he made, I've thought about some of the illustrations that he was given. But I remember in that sermon, I forgot what it was called exactly, but he talked about how that 40 years the children of Israel were wandering in the wilderness. One of the things that they had to do to go in the promised land, they had to leave all that generation behind that died in the wilderness. I mean, they literally, and the way he kind of illustrated, were stepping over dead bodies to keep going forward to the promised land. And he's like, part of what you're going to have to do as a Christian, you're going to have to step over them dead bodies. You're going to see soldiers fall in battle. They're dead. They're gone. You can't do anything about it. You can't bring them back. But you have to keep fighting. You have to keep going. Just staying with the rotting corpse isn't going to accomplish anything. You've got to determine that you're going to move forward. And it's not a good, pleasant thought. We love people. We love our fellow comrades. We love those who fall. And we loved fighting with them. We loved all the camaraderie we had and all the things. But at the end of the day, not everyone's going to make it. Some people are going to give up. Some people are going to quit. You're going to find out some people were phonies and were never even the real thing. But you know what? You don't get to quit when you find those things out. You have to keep on going. And that's exactly a theme that we see in the Scriptures. You just have to keep on going. So the Christian life, it's always been a battle. It always will be a battle. Too many people are looking for a life with no fight. You want to know why a lot of preachers are compromising? They're seeing the battles. They're seeing people take the heat for preaching certain things. They're like, I don't want to deal with that. I want to have a church, but I don't want to be, they say I don't want to be divisive. But they're really saying, I don't want to fight. I don't want to fight anybody. You know, I want to preach the truth of doctrine, but I don't want to get in fights with the other. I don't want to criticize the other church. I don't want to criticize. I don't want to call out any false doctrine. You know what? They don't want to fight. God never called us to that. God never called us to a religion where we just sit around on lawn chairs, you know, sipping tea in the sunshine. No, He called us to get out in the battle and to fight. And if you're going to do that, if you're going to fight, you're going to get hurt. You're going to get cut. You're going to get shot. You're going to get punched. You're going to get knocked down. You're going to get bruised. But by the grace of God, you can keep getting up. You can keep on getting up. You can keep on fighting. And we need to get in the fight. And we just need to learn how to fight wounded. You know what? I think it's pointless preaching. You know, I think it's just pointless preaching a message. How we can avoid just problems. You know what we need to do? Go through them. Endure them. And let God's grace be sufficient. So with that, let's pray. Dear Lord, I thank you so much for this passage of Scripture and the examples that you have given us. I thank you for the pattern that you set that we're supposed to follow in our lives. And so, dear Lord, I pray you'll help us to be successful in this. Help us to learn to get closer to you, to be more reliant on you. And I pray, Lord, you'll help us to do great things through you. In your name we pray. Amen.